Throughout the last few years on this channel, we have taken a deep dive into the 11th generation Honda Civic. And each time I've stated, it's the best car you can buy in this segment. For me, it's the complete package. While the Elantra might have better technology, I still don't think it's giving you the best value overall. You could say, well, what about the Toyota Corolla? But I think it's a bit archaic in this market, especially now in 2024. They desperately need to change up that car moving forward to compete with the Civics and Elantras of the world. But for me, it's the complete package. It's the fact that you do get a car that is affordable and economical, but also you get some great powertrains under the hood, and better yet for the interior, great technology, and also an upscale driving environment that you typically don't find in this market. This car just has it all. But what about the Civic Si? This summer we've checked out some really fun cars, such as the Mazda Miata, Toyota GR86, the Volkswagen GLI, and for myself, I own a Subaru WRX and Volkswagen GTI. So I am no stranger to cars in this market, but one car I am a stranger to is the Si, and since this car popped up here at Atamian Honda, I figured why not take the opportunity to take a deep dive into the sedan and check out what it's offering at around $30,000. And in this video, we're going to go over everything. We're going to check out the exterior, the interior, take it out for a test drive, and see why, if you are looking at buying a fun daily driver with a 6-speed manual, the Honda Civic Si might be the best choice on the market today. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Atamian Honda up here in Tewksbury, Massachusetts, for letting me come down here to check out this Civic Si. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Honda inventory. So as always, let's begin with pricing. Most likely you've already seen the 2022 badge on the window, with this being a used car. So I'm not going to be focusing on used car price evaluations. But for 2024, you're looking at spending right around $30,000. Now that is priced very competitively with the Volkswagen GLI and also the Elantra N-Line. Some people might even be as bold to say that it could compete with a Subaru WRX. Now with the WRX, you are getting all-wheel drive and a larger 4-cylinder engine with 271 horsepower, whereas this you're getting 200 horsepower. So that delta is pretty wide. And that is one of the reasons why I wouldn't necessarily compare the Si to that WRX. But when you are looking at buying a fun daily driver or just a fun sports car that you want to put in your driveway and have some fun on some weekends, you could cross-shop this with a Mazda Miata or Toyota GR86. And I don't think you're really necessarily sacrificing anything by going with a sedan. In fact, it's going to be more family friendly. It's also going to probably be more dailyable as well. It just has this nice balance, especially for its price point, where you could cross-shop it with a number of different vehicles under 40 grand. Now, one thing I will say though, and most of you guys have already experienced this so far if you are looking at buying a new Si, you're most likely spending over sticker on the brand new market and then spending close to sticker for a lightly used Si. These cars are sought after, and also they're holding on to their value. So if you are looking for a car that you're going to keep for 2 or 3 years and you want a car that does hold on to its resale value, the Si is most certainly a top candidate for sure. But where the Civic Si does differentiate itself from its closest rivals and diverges quite a bit in regards to overall design compared to other sports sedans in this price range and market is the fact that the Si doesn't scream and shout at you that it is the sport variant for 2024 or whatever model you're going with for the 11th generation. And I think Honda did that on purpose because you have the Type R. So with the Type R, it's worth spending $45,000 to get those aggressive body lines and aggressive front and rear fascias. Whereas with the Si, it kind of looks like a Honda Civic Sport. And that is why when you are looking at this car from far away, it looks like a sport. It doesn't look like an Si at all. So it blends right in on the roadways and shouldn't draw too much attention if you are somebody who does want to drive very spiritedly and aggressively on your daily commutes. Up front, you will have a honeycomb mesh grille with the Si badge, letting you know this is the Si, of course, but also it's more aggressive and pronounced than what you're going to find on the Civic Sport. Also for the lower grille, you're still going to have some of that mesh design as well, giving you that sportier look. And then with the same headlight design and body lines on the hood, it has this nice road presence to it. It does look rather mature, even though back in late 2020 or early 2021 when this car was unveiled on Twitch, everyone was saying, wow, Honda's really trying to target a younger consumer demographic. I actually don't think so, but also I think that was the case back then because the Accord no longer had the V6 and was no longer offering the manual. So if you wanted that 6-speed manual, you had to go with a sporty Honda Civic, and you have that here with this design for the front fascia. Now moving over to the side profile, the Civic Si comes equipped with 18-inch alloy wheels standard. But our model is sitting on 19, so this was, of course, a modification that someone did. And I have to say, I kind of dig it because it looks like they've come off of a Honda Accord. Now, again, I don't know my aftermarket wheels very well or the wheel packages for Honda, but this does give the Civic an OEM Plus design that I actually really like. For the side mirror caps, they will be gloss black, giving a nice color contrast on this model. And better yet, you will have blind spot detection for added safety. And as we make our way around to the back, the giveaway here that it is the Si if this car was debadged would be the dual exhaust outlets, but also a deck-lid spoiler on the trunk, giving this car a nice dynamic presence on the roadways. But better yet, for the 11th generation, even though it does have youthful attributes and sporty attributes, it does look more mature than its predecessors, which is why I think a lot of older enthusiasts who are in their 30s and early 40s are hopping into the Si because they can have that fun, they can have that 6-speed manual, and of course have that great suspension and chassis, but they're not drawing a lot of attention like they did in the past, maybe back in the early 2000s or mid 2010s. This car does look like a baby Honda Accord from certain angles, and I think it really reflects the direction that the automotive industry is going in, that Honda is trying to go more upscale, more in the direction of being more for a older buyer, even though the Honda Civic Si is going to draw in people of all ages. I just think that what Honda's done to this generation is quite remarkable for an affordable car like this. Under the hood for the 11th generation Civic Si, you have a 1.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, producing 200 horsepower and 192 pound-feet of torque, and this engine can only be paired with a 6-speed manual, placing it in some very unique company, but also is one of the most rare options that you have here right now in 2024, where if you don't know how to drive manual, you're out of luck, but also if you really want the Si, you're going to have to learn on this car. And actually, it's not too bad of a car to get adjusted to. So I think you're going to find yourself being right at home if you are new to the stick shift life. When it pertains to 0 to 60 times, you're looking at right around 6.5 seconds. So not the quickest in this market. It will be a bit slower than the Mazda Miata and GR86. But with the Honda Civic Si still being a daily driver, you're probably not looking for all that straight line speed. You just want a car that handles really well, gives you that sports tuned suspension, but also a car that is a great value at around $30,000. Better yet though, and this is where the Civic Si really showcases its value, would be the fuel efficiency. You're looking at right around 27 miles per gallon in the city and 37 miles per gallon on the highway. That would be somewhat untouchable in this market. That's far better than the Subaru WRX and is better than the Volkswagen GLI. So if fuel economy and also being economical is a top priority, but you still want that 6-speed manual, the Honda Civic Si is likely your best choice. So stepping inside the Si, you're greeted by a sportier cabin compared to other trims for the 11th generation Civic. Up front, you are going to have sport cloth seats that are manually adjustable, giving you a lot of support and bolstering. If you are comparing this to a Volkswagen GTI or Subaru WRX, such as the base or premium, I would say in regards to comfort, it falls right in line with both models. Now, one thing I do like about the Civic Si is that it can be both daily drivable and be your commuter car, while also being a fun weekend car as well, where you can take it up to the mountains or the back roads and really experience this car to its limits. Also, the thing too is that some people might even feel compelled to take this car out to the track and autocross it. And because it is sports tuned, it gives you the ability to really enjoy this car in a number of different ways. On the back of these seats, you are going to have the Si logo embroidered, giving you that sportier quality and persona that you want to have here with this model. Now, for the patterns on these seats, that does make its way to the door panels. And with the door panels, you have a nice padding here, so that way you can just relax and enjoy the driving experience when you are cruising or commuting to work. Then you will have red accents on the dashboard, contrasting very nicely with the gloss black trim that's also found on the dashboard. For the rest of the interior though, not too much is different compared to the other Civics out there for the 11th generation. You will have a half analog, half digital gauge cluster, which I really like this setup. You can customize what you see on the screen in front of you by using the buttons on the steering wheel, but it does give you a nice blend of being both old school while also still feeling modernized as well. This is a better setup than what we find in the Subaru WRX. Also, of course, you see this across other models in the Honda lineup, so you're not missing out on anything by going with the Civic Si. Then taking a look at your infotainment system, you'll have a 9-inch touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility. One thing I do like though is that you will have physical buttons for the home screen and back button, also a physical dial for the volume and tuning. There'll be quick access buttons below that will get you to different menus, but if you're just using this screen, you're swiping back and forth, very responsive, very high quality, and actually I do think compared to what's in some older Toyota products such as the Corolla, this is far better of a head unit compared to what you see in that generation Corolla. Then beneath the screen, you are going to have some dials for your climate control settings, AC, front and rear defrosters. Then beneath that, 2 USB inputs, a 12-volt outlet, and a cubby for a smartphone. Then we get to the more important aspect for the interior and dashboard layout for the Civic Si. To the left of the gear shifter, you will have some different drive modes, such as Sport, Individual, and Normal. Now with Individual, you can customize your driving experience to your liking. Now personally, I think I'd rather be in Sport all the time with this car, because if you want to go in Normal or Comfort settings, just stick with a Sport or maybe even a Touring. But if you're looking for a car like this, most likely you want to set it up to a more aggressive style of driving. Then to the right will be your gear shifter for your 6-speed manual. And I have to say, the short throws are very satisfying. And even when you are on the clutch, you can easily find the bite point. So this is a car you can just hop right into, feel right at home, and go on that journey, go on that road trip, or just have a blast on some winding back roads. Then next to the gear shifter will be your electronic parking brake and brake hold buttons. You'll find 2 cup holders. And finally, for the center storage compartment, there'll be plenty of room for some smaller items, such as a couple wallets, smartphones, or other gadgets. And lastly, above, there will be a power moonroof, which will let in a lot of natural light to the interior. Now moving on to the second row for the Si. Passengers in the back will be greeted by 37.5 inches of legroom, which, believe it or not, that's an inch better than the Subaru WRX. Looks can most certainly be deceiving when it pertains to the Civic, because from the outside you're thinking, wow, this car does look rather small, and it might be a bit claustrophobic for me and what I'm looking for at around $30,000. Now, behind this seat here that I've adjusted most of the way back, it's not on a recline, I still have a few inches of legroom to work with here. I think that if you have average-sized adults sitting back here, maybe you're showcasing what the Si is all about, or you are on a longer drive, or maybe you have kids in the back, everyone should be comfortable. Now, there are a few things that you will be sacrificing by going with the Si over, say, a WRX or a GLI. And it's just because this car is priced under $30,000 to start. You don't expect to receive all the bells and whistles or amenities. But for interior space, it really isn't that bad. I mean, for a sedan, you still have a decent amount of headroom. So I think that for passengers on the height of 5'8", 5'9", they won't be feeling claustrophobic or feeling cramped sitting back here, but I do think that taller passengers might be hitting their head on the headliner, but you would expect that for a car in this market. Now, in regards to shoulder room, there's a decent amount of it. I think you could squeeze in a third person back here on a very short drive, but keep in mind this isn't going to be the most family-friendly option. But most likely, if you're looking at buying a Civic Si and you're cross-shopping it with other cars in this market, it's not likely you have a big family, so that is not going to be a priority at all. But you do have the interior space, most importantly, with this car that really, I think, is a surprise for a car like this and of its size. Now, as I just mentioned, you are sacrificing a bit by going with the Si. And it's not just the fact that we don't have 2 center-mounted air vents or a USB-C or USB input, it's also the cloth upholstery as well. Honda prioritized the front passenger and driver, but I feel like for passengers in the back, there's not a lot of bolstering, there's not a lot of support back here. There is comfort, but it's not going to be as aggressive as what you're going to find in some rivals, so keep all of that in mind. But what you are going to get, though, is a center armrest with 2 cup holders. Then making our way around to the back one more time to check out the rear cargo area. You are not going to have a power trunk with the Si. That is not too much of a surprise. But inside, behind the second row seat, you're looking at right around 12.5 cubic feet of room, which would be par for the course in this market and fall right in line with the Volkswagen GLI, Elantra N-Line, and also the Subaru WRX. For those wondering how much you can actually store back here, I was able to fit all my camera gear today, no problem. So that's 2 bags of camera gear, a gimbal box, and a tripod. And there was still a lot more room to store some travel bags or maybe go grocery shopping afterwards. So I think that if you are going on a road trip with some friends or some family, you could probably fit maybe 6, 7, or 8 bags of luggage, no problem. Of course, you can lower the second row seats when they aren't in use to store some longer items, such as maybe a couple of skis and snowboards, or maybe a smaller table, but that's basically it. And as we've already talked about, most likely you're not buying this car for its practicality. But honestly though, for a sedan of this size, this cargo area is deceptively wide, giving you some nice side pockets for some smaller items. But I think though that as a daily driver, it should fulfill the needs that you have when you are looking for a fun car such as this. And now that we've gone over everything, let's take the Si out for a quick test drive to see how it performs. So after years of waiting and many months of anticipation, I'm finally getting the opportunity to experience the Honda Civic Si for the 11th generation. This car has always intrigued me and has fascinated me from the standpoint that the 11th generation Civic I've always loved. I felt that from a mechanical aspect, the way it was engineered, it has the heavier steering, has a nice suspension and chassis, and just the overall value is something that you really can't beat. For the Si, there's not much of a difference there in regards to the overall value, because you're buying a car around $30,000 with a fuel economy of 27 miles per gallon in the city and 37 miles per gallon on the highway. That is very difficult to pass up on, and I did by going with the Subaru WRX. And I've often wondered, you know, if a Honda Civic Si was available at the time at around $30,000, do I go with the Civic Si over my WRX? I still think at the end of the day, probably not, because I wanted all-wheel drive and I'm power hungry. I want 271 horsepower. But one thing I will say though, with the 6-speed manual, with this 1.5 liter turbo, there is a good amount of power here. What I also find more satisfying though, rather than the straight line speed, is this 6-speed manual and the short throws. Compared to the Subaru WRX, even with the short throw shifter, you have to reach for 5th and 6th. This all feels nice together, and it's very mechanical. And you kind of expect that from Honda because they've been building this car for many generations and years. But it has this nice balance of feeling modernized while still feeling very much like an old school sedan. The rev matching, so easy. Also, with this clutch, super light and very easy to find that bite point. Dare I say, everything about this car in regards to just daily driving it is very satisfying. And there's not a lot of cars in this market that give you that. That right off the bat, you have this short throw shifter. You also have a car that really feels dialed in. Now, our model does have an aftermarket exhaust, which is kind of throwing me off a bit because I would rather have this car be quiet so I can understand what this sedan is all about, with it being, I guess, the top trim for 2024 or now just the 11th generation. I have to say though, comparing this to a GLI or even my Subaru WRX, I think interior wise, this is aesthetically more pleasing. The materials that Honda used are higher quality than what you're going to find in a WRX, especially for a base or premium, which would be similarly priced. Technology, I think this could give Volkswagen's MIB3 user interface a run for its money. Also, I love the half digital, half analog gauge cluster and the physical dials. This car just has a really nice balance to it that a lot of manufacturers are having a very difficult time finding in 2024. Now, unfortunately, we are in some heavy traffic here on this highway, and on highway speeds with this exhaust, that's really all you're hearing. There's not a lot of wind noise in this car. And also the 19-inch alloy wheels on this particular Civic Si, actually, they're not too bad. I would prefer the 18s just for this to be a more fair review. But even with the larger tires, it feels really nice on the roadways that are on 45 miles an hour. Now, I don't know what else the previous owner did to this car, but it does feel very well planted. I feel like I'm one with the road. And I think a lot of it, too, is because of these seats. These sports seats really help give you this feeling of not sitting on top of the car, but rather being part of the chassis. I love the fact that they're very aggressively bolstered. You're not swaying in these seats at all. And they're actually rather comfortable for them being cloth. Also, since we really can't test out the speed here, at least going in this direction, overall vision, nice panoramic view. A-pillars are super thin. You will not have any blind spots when you are approaching intersections or red lights. Taking a look at your side mirrors, they're huge, so you can see what's in your blind spots and in the lane next to you. And then looking out back, of course, with this being a sedan, you are going to have the headrest getting in your way, but I can see what's directly behind me. So nice overall vision. Also, decent amount of shoulder room. The Honda Civic from the outside looks so small that you would think, oh, it's going to feel very claustrophobic in here. Not quite. I mean, the dashboard does wrap around you. You do feel as though you're in more of a fighter jet-like cockpit in this car. I actually prefer it more than what you have in the GLI, and dare I say, I think this is better than what I have in my Subaru WRX. So for a car at like $30,000, this is pretty fantastic to experience. On the brakes, nice and strong, very nice and strong. It's so easy to rev match. Now, you do have auto rev matching for the Civic Si, which I was contemplating using, but I guess you could say I'm a purist now, because every single manual car I've driven has not had auto rev, so what's the point even testing that out? I know some journalists are really into that right now, like, oh, cars need auto rev matching. No, you don't. Especially even in traffic, like living in Boston. I get used to it. You get used to it after a while. This car is satisfying to drive. It is so much fun for a car with only 200 horsepower. Now, at highway speeds, it does feel pretty composed at around 65 miles an hour. And there's a decent amount of torque and power at your disposal. Obviously, this is not an Elantra N or Subaru WRX, so when you are putting the power down, it's not going to feel as quick. But when you do need to make lane changes and pass slower drivers, you can most certainly do that with ease. But sadly, I'm doing this test drive at rush hour up here in Massachusetts, which isn't always the best case. And in the corners, I'm thoroughly impressed here. It handles very well. Everything feels so smooth in this car. It's very difficult to make any mistakes when you're driving, when you're rev matching, when you're downshifting, upshifting. Everything just feels so well balanced, so well put together. And just the way it drives and handles. Even going over the bumps and imperfections, it handles them extremely well. Best of all, what Honda did to the touch points with the leather-wrapped steering wheel, this gear shift knob, even the lightness of the clutch. I feel as though I have been driving the Si for months now, and it's only been about maybe 15 minutes. Every car that I've driven with a manual, I have to get acclimated with. With the Civic Si, you hop right into it, and you feel as though you're right at home. You know, I've always felt, just on paper, that the Honda Civic Si was near perfect. And I'm going to stick with it being near perfect, because it's not perfect at all. No car in this market is. But this probably has far less flaws than any other vehicle in this market and segment. The only drawbacks I have here with the Si is, one, the pricing, because on the new market, you're spending over sticker to get this car. So when you're spending around $34,000, $35,000, I think there's better options out there. Then it's the horsepower. To only get 200 horsepower out of this 1.5 liter turbo, you can do better with a GR86, Volkswagen GLI, or of course the Subaru WRX. But one thing I will say, this is probably the more mature choice in this market, because you're getting a car at $30,000, if you can get it at invoice, that is economical, that isn't going to break the bank, that feels far more upscale than the price tag would suggest, even with the cloth upholstery, even with the hard touch plastics on the dashboard. And also, in regards to the chassis, the suspension, as I talked about numerous times with other Honda Civics for the 11th generation, this car just feels so much more dialed in and so much more pleasant to drive than its closest rivals, especially at this price point. All in all, after this quick test drive, I am blown away here with what the Si is providing. On paper, it looks very much unassuming. For those who love this car, you see 200 horsepower, a great 6-speed manual, and also the fact you're only spending $30,000 to get behind the wheel of this car. So there's really not much more you could possibly want, but there's a lot more than meets the eye. When you get behind the wheel, this car feels very enthusiast focused and enthusiast engineered. And it's because of that, I think even though it is lacking in regards to horsepower, this might be one of the most fun cars that I have ever driven in this market. I would put this just behind the Miata, the GR86, and then we have the Civic Si. The Civic Si, right now at least, is in my top 3 out of the cars I have featured under $40,000 in this segment with a 6-speed manual. The Civic Si, in regards to this 6-speed, it's better than what you have in the GLI. With the GLI, I say go with the DSG. When you're comparing this to a Subaru WRX, I think the short throws are far more satisfying than what I have in my car. Also, just the interior layout, the dashboard, the technology. This car, and I've talked about this so many times with the 11th generation, it feels so much more expensive than the price tag would suggest, and that carries over to the Si. This is a fantastic value, and it's because of that I think the Si most certainly is worthy of being on your list of considerations if you are looking at buying a car under $40,000, or heck, at around $30,000. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys next time.